trying to sort of balance protecting the children, Catherine.
Parenthood isn't a prerequisite for understanding the importance of the early years.
Prince William and Catherine thus disclosed the devastating news that the palace had been attempting to hide 5 minutes ago. Following a private incident that left him too terrified to return, Prince Louis has been excused from any future royal appearances. However, the royal household is not in a panic because of the choice itself. When Louis was discovered by himself with an envelope that shouldn't have gotten to him, he told his parents that he had repeatedly sought for assistance. Additionally, the grown-ups in his immediate vicinity had disregarded him because it was said that Queen Camilla had given the stranger permission to enter the meeting. Everything was altered by that one detail. An awkward meeting was transformed into a royal security probe. 2 palace houses were pitted against one another as a result. Additionally, it made William and Catherine face a prospect that neither of them wanted to accept. Unbeknownst to them, someone had gained access to their youngest child. Furthermore, Louis's palace rank was more important than his terror when he attempted to alert those around him. It was intended to be a peaceful family get-together at Balmoral when the event started. Outside the gates, there were no crowds. Along the road, there were no photographers waiting. The event was kept under wraps, meticulously planned, and guarded by personnel who had been instructed on who was allowed in close proximity to the royal children. That's what William and Catherine thought anyway. As Louis moved between the garden terrace and the main reception area, an unknown man started to show up everywhere he went. Nothing dramatic enough to startle the room at first. A kind grin, an innocent inquiry, a fleeting attempt at dialogue. Louis then made his way over to another's group of visitors. The man trailed behind. Louis went up to a domestic helper and discreetly stated that he didn't want the guest standing close to him. The assistant informed Louis there was nothing to be concerned about after glancing across the room and identifying the man as a member of Camilla's wider social circle. The visitor was accepted. From the aide's perspective, the issue was resolved. However, minutes later, Louis came back with the same caution. He claimed that the man would not abandon him this time. Once more, the worry subsided. Once more, the child was reassured rather than shielded. Nobody saw that Louis was about to vanish from the busiest area of the event, and nobody wanted to humiliate a visitor who had been personally invited through the Queen's household. Hello, viewers. Do you think that, until the whole truth is revealed, William and Catherine should keep Prince Louis away from anyone associated with Camilla's household? Comment yes or no. Subscribe, like, and share this video to show that you are rooting for Catherine, William, and little Louis tonight, because the palace might think it can dismiss a scared youngster, bury his warning, and continue as if nothing had happened if people who support the Wales family remain mute while Camilla's group defends its own. Don't leave Louis on his own. Let William and Catherine witness the public's strong support for their family. When a staff member saw that Louis was no longer on the patio, it was the first indication that something was amiss. An assistant examined the adjacent hallway. One more looked through the waiting areas. Subsequently, a security guard was notified that the young prince had been observed approaching a restricted garden entry, with the stranger trailing him by a few steps. The mood abruptly shifted. William was abruptly drawn out of a conversation. All Catherine was informed was that employees were looking for Louis. Behind the kind grin, security guards started rushing through Balmoral with increasing urgency, but no alarm was sounded in front of the other visitors. Louis was discovered close to the restricted entrance next to a stone wall. He was by himself. The stranger has vanished. A sealed brown envelope with no name, no official mark, and no clue as to who had brought it into the meeting was also cradled in the child's hands. Louis was requested to turn it over by a security guard. He declined. He wouldn't let it go until William got there. William knelt down, put both hands on his son's shoulders, and inquired as to who had handed him the letter. Louis turned to face the palace doors and recognized the guy he had forewarned the aides about. But then he said something that completely altered Catherine's expression. He had attempted to inform them. Because the man was with Granny Camilla, they refused to listen. William grabbed his son's mail and gave it straight to security. As of yet, no one in the Wales household was aware of its contents. Diana's name would eventually be linked to the incident, but no one knew why. And no one realized that the cautions Lewis had issued before to his discovery were already being removed from the first official report. The child had received the envelope. His parents were going to learn the truth. The envelope next to the garden wall was not opened by William. Before posing another query, he gave it to the security guard, pushed Lewis away from the restricted entry, and kept one arm around him. Had he been touched by the man, Lewis gave a head shake. Had he made a threat against him? No, once again. However, the toddler continued to gaze towards the walkway, as if he anticipated the visitor's return. That terror was important. The envelope was taken by the officer to a secure room within Balmoral, where senior staff members witnessed its examination and photography. William stayed with Louis. When Catherine arrived a short while later, she saw that something had changed. Her son wasn't just angry. He was keeping an eye on every door. The room quieted when the envelope was opened. There were multiple printed photos inside. One depicted Diana departing from a public event that had taken place years prior. Another depicted William next to his mother as a little boy. The Wales family was seen coming at a private function in a third. The finished picture was not the same. William, Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Lewis were positioned in the line of succession in this official portrait. Someone had scribbled a note across the back. The entire sentence was not repeated in front of Lewis by security. The message mentioned Diana cautioned William that history could repeat itself and implied that his ability to defend his family would determine the monarchy's destiny. It was a message meant to stick in the mind and make a parent wonder who had been watching rather than a clear threat. William read it twice. Before departing the Balmoral grounds, the stranger was stopped. He didn't fight back. Rather, he maintained that he was invited, that the Queen's staff was aware of his identity, and that he was authorized to go. Authorization. That word changed the course of the inquiry. This was no longer just about what Louis had been given. It concerned how the man had gotten in who had given his approval, and why the Wales home had not been informed that he would be close to the kids. Security confirmed the visitor's name against the authorized list before removing him. The record did not explain why he needed entrance to a private family event, but it did show his affiliation with Camilla's extended circle next to the entry. Lewis then started speaking. The man had come up to him close to the reception area, he told Catherine. He was no longer there. The man had trailed behind. After expressing his discomfort to one assistant, Louis told another adult that he did not want the guest close to him. The response had been the same each time. Camilla's family knew the visitor. There was nothing to be concerned about. Louis had trusted them. Catherine was devastated by that. Her youngster had done precisely what kids are instructed to do. He was no longer there. He had discovered adults. He had spoken with clarity. However, the child in front of them was not as trusted by the adults as a name on a list. The Wales family was not present as the event went on later that night. Catherine led Lewis upstairs, while William stayed with security personnel. When the hallways were silent, she expected him to settle down. He didn't. He wouldn't sleep by himself. Lewis wanted to know if the man was aware of their residence. He questioned whether William would suffer a negative outcome as a result of the envelope. Then he posed the query that Catherine had been dreading. Would they force him to go to another palace event? No, she told him. Not until he was prepared. Not until he regained faith in those around him. However, Catherine entered the hallway and sobbed as Louis eventually closed his eyes. This was more than a single guest. It concerned a system that had taught its employees to steer clear of humiliation, safeguard senior names, and ease awkward situations before questioning whether a scared child might be telling the truth. William was too familiar with the routine. Growing up, he had witnessed personal suffering turn into an issue that needed to be handled rather than a cautionary tale. He asked for the first written security report by midnight. Less than an hour later, the document was delivered. It explained the location of Lewis's discovery. The envelope was recorded. The visitor's removal was noted. It contained the names of the participating officers, as well as the time and place. However, one item was absent. Lewis's prior warning was not mentioned. Never once. According to the report, the incident was unexpected, abrupt, and unavoidable. After carefully reading the page, William put it on the table in front of his security director. Was this the original version, he questioned? The response did not arrive promptly. William gave a clear directive. Before daylight, all notes, gate entrance, guest requests, handwritten amendments, and prior drafts related to the event were to be safeguarded. The story had already been changed by someone. He also desired that it remain unaltered. William now wanted the original. Balmoral's private hallways had transformed before dawn. The building no longer felt like a refuge the guests had left, and the gathering was ended. It had the atmosphere of an evidence room. The documents were gathered in a secured office by William's security director. Clearance papers, staff messages, updated guest lists, handwritten notes, and gate logs were all present. There was a time on each page, narrated a portion of the story each time. The guest had not gone overlooked. 48 hours prior, his name had been flagged. Because the Wales home had not been consulted, his sponsor details were insufficient, and his motive for coming was unclear. The first security evaluation had denied him. 3 words were placed next to the name by the officer who reviewed the request. Don't confess. That ought to have put an end to it. Rather, 6 hours later, a second entry surfaced, after an assistant from Camilla's home called the planning staff and cautioned that sending the guest away would be embarrassing. The refusal was overturned. The assistant asserted that the Queen's private office had personally cleared the man. There was no accompanying document. There had been no independent check. However, the name was added to the list of permitted names. William silently observed the sequence. He had anticipated negligence. He discovered what appeared to be pressure. Someone had pushed the visitor through, despite seeing the notice, and realizing that his household had not been notified. The following revelation followed. During the meeting, a junior protection officer had jotted down a casual remark. Before Lewis vanished from the patio, it was noted that he made 2 approaches to employees. He was described as nervous in the first note. According to the second, he had requested that the guest be kept away from him. The final report did not include those lines. It wasn't until Louis was discovered close to the restricted entry that the official narrative started. Everything that had previously occurred was wiped, including the options, the cautions, and the times when an adult may have taken action. That was hardly a harmless omission. It altered accountability. The occurrence appeared abrupt in the absence of those warnings. It appeared avoidable with them. William inquired as to who wrote the report. The response turned up a senior home coordinator who handled various royal activities, but had just gotten directives from Camilla's office. Due to their lack of confirmation and potential for confusion, the coordinator insisted that the prior notes be deleted. That explanation did not sit well with William. A child had said something. He had been heard by 2 workers. It had been recorded by 1 officer. Nothing about that was ambiguous. After sunrise, Catherine joined the review. After reading the initial note once, she read it again, this time more slowly. She continued to concentrate on the same sentence. Louis had requested that the man be kept at bay. There had been a warning. The palace had decided not to proceed with it. That decision went beyond a single afternoon at Balmoral for Catherine. It affected the royal family's oldest fear: the tendency to view personal pain as a problem that needs to be resolved before others notice. William was aware of the habit since he was young. He was aware of how easily a family's suffering may be attributed to schedule, phrasing, and reputation. Catherine would not allow Louis to experience that. She and William made their first choice before breakfast. Until he said he was ready, their youngest son would not attend any formal gatherings, public engagements, or private palace events. Advisors would not soften his absence, courtiers would not negotiate it, and his absence would not be overturned to avoid publicity. His security was the top priority. Hello folks, please subscribe, like and share this video if you believe that Catherine and William were correct to pick Louis over pressure from the palace. If you believe that the Wales family should never be forced to stand alone, while Camilla's household defends its own influence, then leave a comment. Only those who thought a child's warning might be erased from the record benefit from silence. The second choice was more ambitious. William mandated an impartial examination of each person admitted to George Charlotte and Louis-related events. Any verbal authority-based approval would be scrutinized. Any changes to the clearance would be tracked. Staff members would be questioned if they disregarded written security guidance. The palace was uneasy about that order. Calls were traveling between London and Balmoral by noon. Camilla's family was curious about the reason behind the seizure of planning data. William was questioned by senior advisors about whether he planned to escalate one incident into a larger conflict. His response was straightforward. The conflict had already started. Soon after Camilla responded, Catherine did not receive the apologies she had anticipated. Rather, the statement cautioned that taking Louis out of engagements could lead to rumors, raise challenging issues, and harm the reputation of stable families. The notification implied that the visitor had already been eliminated. Now the issue needs to be resolved in private. Then followed the comment that put an end to all possibility of reaching a compromise. According to one advisor, Louis would eventually have to adjust to royal pressure. Silently, Catherine read the sentence. Her face remained unchanged. However, her choice was definitive when she returned the message to William. Her son would not be near somebody who thought fear was a training tool. Catherine didn't speak up. The room became quieter as a result. Between Camilla and William, the note from her home remained on the table. Its language is refined, cautious, and nearly rational. It discussed the pressures associated with royal life, family harmony, and public perception. However, the same thought lurked beneath each calculated statement. Louis was supposed to adjust. The adults who let him down weren't. It was plenty for Catherine to hear. William was informed by her that their boy would not be sent back to any environment where discomfort could be written off as weakness and where a strong name could stifle a warning. Louis had done everything correctly. He was no longer there. He had said something. He had requested safety. The grown-ups in his immediate vicinity were responsible for his failure. William concurred. By late morning, his secretary had started drafting an emergency access order that would cover all of the Wales children's events. The agreement was strong enough to alter the way two royal houses functioned, but it was also specific enough to be put into effect right away. A Wales family event would not allow personal guests to enter without independent security clearance. A written denial would not be superseded by an oral directive from the King, the Queen, or any other senior monarch. A guest list that included George Charlotte or Louis could not be changed by any employee from another family without informing William's office. Additionally, no incident report pertaining to the kids would be altered prior to obtaining the original notes. The last sentence was the strongest. While the investigation was ongoing, employees who altered Louis's report or overturned the visitor's refusal would be relieved of their planning responsibilities. Before noon, William signed the order. A wall was constructed using just one signature. Immediately, the influence spread throughout the palace. The invitations that were being reviewed were frozen. Security received the guest lists back. Workers who had relied on silent phone conversations had to submit their identities, justifications, sponsors, and written consent. Camilla's family protested. The edict, according to its advisors, reduced the expected cooperation between senior royal households and viewed the Queen's office as a security concern. William's advisors responded that accountability was a prerequisite for cooperation. The children of Wales were not tokens to be transferred between rival positions. Their parents were now in charge of their access. The disagreement grew. Some employees thought William had overreached himself. They were concerned that the limitations would reveal personal differences and spark rumors about Camilla's power. Others silently applauded the shift. Informal authority had outpaced written procedure for years. Doors that security had attempted to keep closed may be opened by a name, a title, or a strategically placed call. At last, that system had encountered opposition. The staff members involved in the revised report had been kicked out of the subsequent Wales event by the afternoon. Planning files were no longer accessible to them. There was no subsequent public notification. No names were disclosed. But everyone in the palace knew what was going on. William had stopped inquiring. He was assuming command. If Princess Anne hadn't asked for the file, the conflict between the homes might have continued. Anne didn't start out feeling anything. She looked over the dates, signatures, and order of decisions. She contrasted the authorized guest list with the officer's warning. She then looked at the first handwritten note next to Lewis's name. The missing document caught her eye. An original request detailing who supplied the name, why access was required, and which office took responsibility should have been provided for each authorized visitor. Only a corrected copy made following the initial rejection was included in the file. Where had the initial request gone? Anne wondered. The response changed twice. When the clearance changed according to one official, it was replaced. Another claimed that in order to avoid misunderstanding, older versions were often burned. She was not satisfied with either explanation. Royal children's security records were not informal invitations. They were designed to protect all choices, even those that were turned down. Anne requested that the event archive be searched. Nothing showed up. After that, she got in touch with the protection officer, whose warning had been disregarded. He could still clearly recall the request. He also recalled feeling uncomfortable when the ruling was overturned in the absence of proof. He had taken a picture of the page and put a duplicate among his duty records before returning the file. There was still that duplication. That day, the equilibrium shifted for the first time. Anne received it in a sealed packet from the officer. The original denial, the warning that the Wales household had not been consulted, and the visitor's incomplete sponsor data were all displayed on the document. There was a scribbled instruction next to the entries. Anne read it once. She then shut the folder. William was informed that the first request had been retrieved, but Anne declined to talk about the phrasing over the phone. She wanted the security director to be in the room, Charles to be there, and the official who took the order to clarify whose power had been utilized. That evening, the meeting was scheduled. Anne only had the folder with her when she came in. There was no counselor by her side. There was no prepared statement on the table. She took out the initial guest request and turned it in their direction after waiting for Charles and William to be seated. The gate had been opened by a single sentence, and the way it was phrased was going to split the palace in two. Anne moved the retrieved guest request towards Charles's direction and set it in the middle of the table. The sight appeared unremarkable. Cream paper, ink in black. In the corner is a security stamp. However, what had transpired at Balmoral was altered by the sentence that was printed next to the denied clearance. The Wales household does not have to be notified if it is admitted with the Queen's permission. No one said anything. After reading the instructions, once William leant in to read them again. Despite their briefness, the statements conveyed intent. Someone was aware that the visitor had not been authorized by his household. Instead of fixing the issue, someone who was aware that security had already denied admission instructed employees to keep William's team out of the decision-making process. Charles wanted to know who wrote it. No one could dodge the question, according to Anne. They called in the official who handled the request. Until the page was put in front of him, he seemed composed. His responses then grew cautious. He said that paperwork from Camilla's office had arrived along with the command. He couldn't recall who brought it. He was unable to verify if the handwriting was Camilla's. All he knew was that the words had the power to undo the rejection. William refused to accept ambiguity as a safeguard. He inquired as to whether his security director had been consulted prior to the guest's admission. No, the official replied. He inquired as to whether the visitor's incomplete sponsor information had been updated. No, once again. William finally questioned the sentence's claim that the Wales household did not require notification. The official was unable to respond. There was a significance to that quiet. A member of Camilla's household came in and questioned the presumption that had been formed around the table. She contended that the handwriting had not been verified. A daring assistant could have written the line, "under the Queen's authority." Not every directive given in Camilla's name might be held against her. There was one thing Anne agreed with. Who wrote it was not yet established by the document. However, it demonstrated something different. A member of Camilla's family thought the Queen's position may get around a security decision pertaining to William's child. That conviction wasn't a coincidence. It had developed inside a system that seldom questioned informal influence. Charles glanced at the page below. The violation extended into his marriage if Camilla had written the directive. If she hadn't, then someone in her immediate vicinity had amassed enough influence to behave as if her approval was assured. The palace was not made any safer by any explanation. William's voice did not waver. The safety decision would not wait, he stressed, but the handwriting study might go on. His command would not change. Without independent written permission, no visitor associated with Camilla's inner circle would go to an event featuring George, Charlotte, or Louis. The delegate raised an objection. Such a restriction, she cautioned, would be seen as a rejection of the Queen. William gave a single response. Unverified access was categorically rejected. The space moved. Charles had to make a decision that he had attempted to avoid. He might put pressure on William to relax the directive and seem to prioritize Camilla's status over Louis's security. Alternatively, he could accept that the Wales family no longer trusted the Queen's staff and let the prohibition stand. He had no room to hide inside protocol thanks to Anne. She stated the line was the crux of the issue and pointed to the phrase, "need not be informed." It demonstrated that the Wales household had not been overlooked. It had been left out on purpose. William and Catherine didn't need to know who was being placed close to their kids, someone had decided. There was no confusion there. Concealment was that. Another detail was disclosed by the Director of Security. After the initial request was denied, but before Balmoral received the updated guest list, the instruction was appended. Despite having time to consider the warning, the responsible party decided to disregard it. Charles wanted to know if the ink could be dated. Although experts could narrow down the time frame, they were unable to identify the writer based solely on ink. Samples from Camilla's employees would be needed for a handwriting comparison, and cooperation was not certain. The enigma grew more complex. William didn't appear shocked. He appeared to be past shock by that point. Louis, the cleansed report, and the parents who anticipated his son's peaceful return after attention subsided had become his only concerns. That wouldn't occur, he replied. Catherine's assistant came in with a message before the meeting was over. Louis's absence was explained as a normal scheduling change in a statement produced by the Palace Communications Office. It had been turned down by Catherine. She refused to let a calendar conceal their son's dread. William put the draft next to the visitor request after folding it. A stranger had been admitted to one document without their knowledge. The other was going to provide an explanation for Louis's disappearance without disclosing the reason to the public. It followed the same trend. They were at the center of decisions regarding their child. Catherine had made the decision to put an end to it. William and she would deal with Louis's absence on their own. They wouldn't act as though nothing had happened, but they would defend his personal remarks. And the palace would find out just how much they were willing to divulge before daybreak. By dawn, A standard scheduling modification was no longer an excuse for the palace. Prince Louis would no longer make royal appearances, according to a statement released by Prince William and Catherine. The envelope was not described by them. The guest was not identified by them. Camilla was not charged with writing the instruction. However, they made one point very clear. Prior to the tragedy, Louis had requested assistance, but those requests had not been appropriately addressed. Because the comment did not sound like palace jargon, it struck a deep chord. No effort was made to attribute the issue to childhood sensitivity pressure or anxiety. William and Catherine characterized their choice as non-negotiable and paternal. Only when he felt safe enough to return would their son do so. There was disagreement within the palace. Some advisors were concerned that the language might make matters worse rather than better. Others were aware that the same failure would recur with any more gentle explanation. Louis had already experienced disregard once. His parents would not permit those who were more focused on looks than trust to justify his absence. On that day, the new security regulations went into force. Independent written consent was now required for each attendee attending an event featuring George Charlotte or Louis. A telephone denial could not be overturned by any private office. Documentation could not be replaced with a senior title. The initial notes would be preserved for any subsequent report on the children of Wales. The revised Balmoral report was taken down. A revised record that acknowledged Louis had approached adults prior to his discovery near the garden entrance took its place. Although the correction did not fix the issue, it stopped the official version from acting as though no one had been alerted. Wales's family planning was no longer available to a number of assistants. There was no public mention of their names. No announcement was made. They were silently removed through locked files, transferred responsibilities, and revoked permissions. Now the wall actually existed. While the investigation was ongoing, Camilla's household was not included in the new approval procedure. William's order was not contested by Charles. There was an interpretation of that silence. For some, it was a show of solidarity for his son. Others said he realized that if he opposed the limitations, things would get worse. However, the core query remained unresolved. The directive was written by whom a review of handwriting yielded no conclusive findings. The sentence did not enough resemble any sample to confidently identify a writer. The visitor's entry was rejected by Camilla's office. Her assistants contended that her authority may have been abused by anyone with access to household stationery. There was no solace in that explanation. It implied that power inside the Queen's household had grown so loosely regulated that an unidentified individual could invoke her name, circumvent security, and keep William's employees out of a decision pertaining to his child. William didn't wait for the handwriting investigation to be completed. He changed the way his family was protected from royal custom to a formal process. He now had to approve every exemption. Each contested name was assigned to a separate officer. Each spoken command had to be documented. Catherine focused on Louis. A few days later, he questioned whether he had let the family down by skipping the next appearance. It was a deeper question than any palace dispute. He had been scared, disregarded, and left to wonder if defending himself had caused problems for everyone else. Catherine informed him that the adults were in charge. It had not been a sign of weakness to ask for assistance. It had been bravery. William reiterated the same point. Louis had fulfilled his obligation. He wasn't the one who failed. To appease others, he would not be forced back into the public eye. The truly devastating news was that a young prince had not just stopped going to royal events. He no longer trusted the individuals tasked with keeping him secure. It would take longer to rebuild trust if William and Catherine changed the regulations, fired employees, and closed doors. Hello, viewers. We support Louis if William and Catherine were correct to select him over Camilla's influence. If you believe that children in Wales should never be sacrificed in order to preserve strong reputations, please subscribe, like, and share this video. If Louis doesn't say anything now, the palace will know that the public won't remember what he attempted to say. The handwritten order's author was not identified at the conclusion of the announcement. Anne wasn't done, though. She discovered a second authorization mark pressed into the lower corner of the document when going over the initial request. It belonged to a different palace office that had been informed in advance that the Wales children would be staying in Balmoral. William had received no warning from that office. The identity behind the second mark and the precise 7-minute phone conversation that took place prior to the visitor's rejection being overturned will be investigated in the next documentary. The individual who actually unlocked the gate can stay hidden if you overlook that aspect.